quick note before we begin. This episode contains adult language and distressing concepts. Witness testimony has concluded in Bruce Lehrmann's defamation action against Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson. In the coming days, the lawyers will make their closing submissions to Justice Michael Lee. So today we're going to recap the evidence and look at how the two sides have made their cases. We'll start with Matthew Richardson SC, counsel for Bruce Lehrmann, who opened his case to the judge by saying this: "We've used a voice actor to bring you his words.
Our client comes here seeking vindication for the defamation that has utterly destroyed him. He comes here for justice."
10 didn't name Lehrmann, but Richardson said it gave enough clues to clearly identify him to everyone in politics and many beyond. Richardson said Brittany Higgins had given several different accounts of her allegation of having been raped in Parliament House by Bruce Lehrmann on 23 March 2019, to friends and colleagues, to her bosses, to police, and to the court in a 2022 criminal trial that was aborted with no verdict. Here's Matthew Richardson. We've used a voice actor to bring you his words.
Our position, Your Honour, is that inconsistencies and improbabilities have accumulated over those various successive accounts. By themselves, they are sufficient to render Ms Higgins an unreliable witness.
Richardson listed the inconsistencies he says exist in Higgins' account. He started with the purchase of alcohol on the night in question. Here I'm going to bring in Kristen Amiet. She's the Front's producer and regular co-host, and if you recognise her voice, it's because she's also the voice actor who's read Brittany Higgins' lines in our coverage of this trial. Chrissy, in the witness box, Matt Collins, KC for Network 10, really hammered Bruce Lehrmann about what he'd purchased on that night, didn't he?
He did. A lot's been made of the CCTV footage of the dock bar where Bruce Lehrmann and Brittany Higgins were having drinks before the alleged incident took place. And Matthew Collins, KC, took Bruce Lehrmann to his financial records from that night. Lehrmann said he'd only been able to find evidence that he'd spent $16 at the dock bar, and Collins said that seems pretty unrealistic for any bar anywhere in Australia in 2019. Lehrmann said he'd never purchased any drinks for Brittany Higgins on that night. The CCTV footage appears to show that he is buying drinks for someone. And there was a lengthy back and forth between Collins and Lehrmann about what he recollected about those transactions.
Here's what Bruce Lehrmann said about that in cross-examination by Matt Collins, KC.
You bought her 2 vodka drinks.
I can't remember. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Be very careful about it, Mr. Lehrmann. Did you buy Miss Higgins 2 vodka drinks in the course of your time at the dock?
Oh, at the dock. You said 2 rounds? I don't believe I bought 2 rounds, no.
I asked 2 drinks. Did you buy her 2 vodka drinks?
I don't recall buying her 2 vodkas, no.
Mr. Wybrow asked you, do you recall buying drinks for anyone other than Austin? You said, I do not. And that was truthful evidence?
I'm happy to be corrected. It's very hard to recall specifically. I'm sorry.
I'm asking for your evidence, Mr. Lehrmann. It's not my job to correct you. Is the answer you gave for Mr. Wybrow truthful or not?
To the best I could recall, yes.
So, as you sit here today, your evidence to His Honour is you have no recollection of buying 2 vodka drinks for Miss Higgins at the dock.
At this moment, I'm really struggling because I'm in the witness box. I'm being very careful not to give definitive answers because my mind is blank at the moment.
Matthew Richardson also identified different stories Higgins has told about her attendance at medical appointments. Chrissy, we've heard evidence throughout the trial that various people told Brittany Higgins she should go and see a doctor after she alleged that she'd been raped.
That's right. Ben Dillaway, who was a close personal friend of Brittany Higgins and also an ex-boyfriend of hers, raised the subject of medical assistance after the alleged incident had taken place, and she did say to him, as well as to other people who've given evidence in the trial, that she either had sought that medical assistance or that she was going to.
Here's what Brittany Higgins said in cross-examination by Steve Wybrow SC, counsel for Bruce Lehrmann.
Miss Higgins, you told those police officers you'd gone to a doctor and had tests done.
That was incorrect, and I've owned that.
What's incorrect? That you told them that?
No, that I went to a doctor. I 100% acknowledge that. That is a lie, and I know that I just wasn't coping at the time, and I wanted to say the things that people wanted to hear. I wasn't looking after myself. I hadn't gone to a doctor. I didn't do it. And I know that, and I've admitted to that to the police and to the criminal trial, and now I admit that.
You've just said that it was a lie that you told the police. You knew it was not true at the time you said it.
Yes, it wasn't on record, but it was wrong.
Matthew Richardson said there were inconsistencies in Brittany Higgins' claims about what she'd been told by her bosses, Fiona Brown and then Senator Linda Reynolds, in a series of meetings. Chrissy, we haven't seen Linda Reynolds in this trial, but what were the inconsistencies between Brittany Higgins and Fiona Brown's accounts?
That's right. Linda Reynolds hasn't given evidence in this trial. All we know about what she allegedly said and did in the days and weeks after the alleged incident is from other people's evidence. During her time in the witness box, Brittany Higgins said she was fearful that she might lose her job over this security breach and over the alleged incident. She also said that she'd felt pressure from Fiona Brown and Linda Reynolds not to go to the police with a complaint. And she claimed that Fiona Brown told her that she wouldn't have a job if she took some time off work to go and be with her family on the Gold Coast. This was around the time when people were being sent around the country to work on an election campaign. Brittany Higgins says she was given a choice between going to Western Australia, staying in Canberra, or going to the Gold Coast. And she said Fiona Brown said that if she chose the Gold Coast option, that she simply wouldn't have a job to come back to. Fiona Brown denied in her evidence that Brittany Higgins' job was ever in jeopardy.
Matthew Richardson also dug into the reasons Brittany Higgins has given for not proceeding with a police complaint after her initial meetings with police in Parliament House and in the ACT. Chrissy, Higgins told other people like Ben Dillaway and Nikita Irvine, an aide-de-camp in Linda Reynolds' office, that she didn't want to go ahead. And in fact, when she was talking to Nikita Irvine, according to Irvine, she put out her hand in a stop motion and basically said, "Stop asking me about it. I've made my decision."
That's right. We heard something similar from another witness called Sam O'Connor, who was a former colleague of Brittany Higgins and a friend. They'd stayed in touch after Brittany Higgins had moved to Canberra to work in Parliament House. He said after Brittany Higgins had disclosed to him that the assault had allegedly happened, that she didn't show any desire to proceed with a police complaint. But then at some point she had a change of heart, I think was how he put it, and that she suddenly became interested in pursuing that police complaint. He said that was surprising to him because she had been so adamant in those early stages that that was not something she wanted.
Here's what Sam O'Connor, who's now a Queensland MP, said in the witness box about the moment Higgins told him she was going to give some interviews about her experience.
I absolutely remember her desire for some sort of change to the culture around Parliament. That had been an ongoing sort of topic of conversation. And this was sort of, in her mind, the next step in achieving that. But I do remember thinking it was unusual because every single conversation we had had up until that point was about her not wanting this to be public and about her going to great lengths to prevent this from becoming public.
And then Matthew Richardson came to the manner in which material on her phone came to be deleted. Now, this was a big deal. Brittany Higgins changed her story in the project's pre-interview, which was played to the court, from "it's been wiped by the government" to later telling Angus Llewellyn that the deletion of stuff from her phone happened in the transfer of phones. There were members of the project team who were very much alive to this inconsistency, weren't there?
Absolutely. It was a big deal, and it's a deal that we still don't really have any clarity on. We heard Angus Llewellyn, who is the producer of the project interview, Lisa Wilkinson, who is the host, and Peter Meakin, who is an executive at Channel 10 working on this interview, all express confusion, doubt, inconsistency about what happened with Brittany Higgins' phone and the information that either remained on it or that was lost from it.
It seemed as though it was Lisa Wilkinson who was the most sort of dogged about wanting to know, well, if she's lost everything from her phone, all her messages, all her photos, then how is she able to produce a photo of a bruise and one message from Fiona Brown that she's given us?
That's right. Lisa Wilkinson actually said about herself that she's not a tech-savvy person and that she didn't know what metadata meant, but yet she was still questioning these inconsistencies and really the confusion of how one photo of a bruise could survive the apparent complete death of a phone or the transfer of a phone, but yet a whole swathe of text messages could be lost. This was something that Lisa Wilkinson raised with her admittedly small team several times. We saw text messages from her to Angus Llewellyn asking him to dig into it a little bit more. And from what we've seen in court, Angus Llewellyn did appear to reassure Lisa Wilkinson that that was something that he'd done.
Here's what Lisa Wilkinson said about this in the witness box.
I thought it was curious.
Did it give you some concerns that she might have some problems in terms of reliability?
It made me think that she was a very scared young woman.
Wilkinson said she wanted to push a bit further.
I was a bit insistent that we needed to do further investigation, and I was told that it had been further investigated and it was now a non-issue.
Richardson's second big point was the precise time at which the allegation of rape emerged.
It was only later on the Tuesday, Your Honour, after Ms Higgins had seen Mr Lehrmann pack up and leave the office after he had met with Ms Brown. And then once she herself attended a meeting with Ms Brown, where the security implications of the after-hours entry into Parliament had been raised and where she had been asked to re-sign a code of conduct.
Exactly what happened at this meeting is in dispute. Higgins said that on the Tuesday she told Brown she'd been assaulted and that Lehrmann was on top of her. Brown is adamant Higgins did not make an allegation of assault at this or any other time to her. She said she asked Higgins, "Did something happen you didn't want?" Brown said Higgins shook her head no.
The first time any document reveals even a hint of a non-consensual encounter is a meeting with her friend Mr Dillaway on the Tuesday afternoon.
Let's hear that message to Ben Dillaway, who Brittany Higgins said was a boyfriend at the time. Dillaway has described the relationship as a more casual, on-off, close personal friendship. We've used voice actors to bring you the exchange between Dillaway and Higgins.
I was barely lucid. I really don't feel like it was consensual at all. I just think if he thought it was okay, why would he just leave me there like that?
So he fucked you. I hope you're okay. This is pretty serious, horrible stuff. You probably need to report this.
Richardson told the judge he anticipated Higgins would say she was so traumatised after the alleged rape that she couldn't explain these inconsistencies.
It may readily be accepted that there is no perfect victim survivor and that some degree of delay or variation in accounts or confusion may well be understandable in some such persons. But of course, a delay in reporting significant changes in accounts, implausibilities of detail and objective false statements may also be consistent with a false complaint.
All that is about the truth defence. Did Bruce Lehrmann, on the balance of probabilities, rape Brittany Higgins? Matthew Richardson then turned to the other defence advanced by Ten and Lisa Wilkinson. It's called qualified privilege for short, but it's also referred to as reasonableness. That is, was it reasonable for the project to air the story? Richardson said Ten and Ms Wilkinson commenced investigating Higgins' side of the story around the 19th or 20th of January 2021, soon after they were contacted by David Shiraz, Brittany Higgins' partner and a TV producer with links to the Labor Party. Here's the text message Lisa Wilkinson sent to Angus Llewellyn.
I have an explosive political story for Sunday Project. It's an extraordinary cover-up involving Linda Reynolds, Michaela Cash and the PMO.
But Llewellyn didn't contact Lehrmann until about 2:45 p.m. on the afternoon of Friday the 12th of February, with a deadline of 10 a.m. on Monday, the day of publication. That day was locked in because journalist Samantha Maiden at news.com.au was also working on the story, and the project team knew she would publish first thing on the Monday morning. Llewellyn tried again to contact Lehrmann that morning, but got no reply. Here's what Lehrmann said about that in the witness box.
I saw an email from Mr. Angus Llewellyn approximately a week after the airing of the project, after I had been admitted to a 21-day mental health facility called Ramsay Northside Clinic near St Leonard's.
Richardson said Llewellyn used a mobile number provided by David Shiraz, dated from a 2018 press release, and 2 email addresses also provided by Shiraz. One was a Hotmail address, the other from a former employer. Chrissy, in the witness box, Llewellyn said that he really did feel that that was adequate time, 2 days before publication.
That's right, and it was something that Lisa Wilkinson echoed. She did strongly deny that there was a commercial imperative to getting the interview up on that Monday night. But she also said she understands how politics works and that it wasn't out of the question to ask somebody, particularly somebody working in government, to work on the weekend in order to return comment to them before the project interview aired. Peter Meakin also said that he thought that several days in advance was an adequate amount of time for Bruce Lehrmann to give comment to the project if he wished to. And he said that he thought Angus Llewellyn had done a great job.
The project had 725,000 viewers on the night of February 15 and about 200,000 more on the internet as catch-up in the next few months. Richardson said this.
Obviously, many persons who viewed it initially would not have identified our client, but the poison would have spread. My client has been publicly maligned as certainly the most prominent rapist, probably one of the more revolting predators of the recent history of this country.
Richardson said the news.com.au story didn't identify the alleged perpetrator as working in the Reynolds office and didn't include other details the project did include, like his work history and where he was now.
We say the publication that seared this allegation of rape into the national consciousness was the TV interview between the complainant and Ms Wilkinson on The Project, carefully edited, Your Honour, to emphasise the emotion of the complainant. The ostentatious outrage of Ms Wilkinson, the visceral denunciation of my client as the most odious of predators, accompanied, as Your Honour will have heard, by sinister sound effects. As you know, a horror movie interlude with melancholy piano sounds as well. Mr Lehrmann has lost everything.
Richardson had this to say about the defendants, Ten and Wilkinson. In her affidavit and in evidence, Wilkinson said although she wanted to be sure everyone in the story had adequate opportunity to comment before publication, that was a job for the producers.
We read that, Your Honour, as in effect saying, if you, Channel 10, are in trouble on this point, we are not going to die on that hill with you.
After the break, what the defence says. Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson's defences rely on the credibility of their own witnesses, the people who put together the project episode, and fundamentally on the credibility of Brittany Higgins. What the plaintiff says are inconsistencies in Higgins' story, well, it's up to the defendants to explain and contextualise them, to convince the judge that despite what the plaintiff says, Higgins was telling the truth all along. In his opening, Matthew Collins KC, representing 10, said this about why Brittany Higgins had not pursued her police complaint after her initial meetings with the AFP. Collins described it as
an increasing sense that it was not in her interest to pursue a complaint in relation to what had occurred. She was struggling. She was a junior employee. For a government minister on the eve of a federal election, the government was expected to lose. She perceived that her complaint presented a political problem that put her dream job at risk.
Here's what Higgins said about this in evidence.
I didn't have any assurance from Fiona Brown that even after the disclosure that I wasn't still up for the sack. I still thought I could have been fired any day. And that was, that was upsetting, but it wasn't as upsetting. So I was upset about thinking I was going to be fired, but also at this point, once I'd vocalised the rape to someone, that's when I finally came out, like the genie was out of the bottle. And I was telling everyone in my life, not everyone, but I started to feel empowered to talk about it, or at least the ball had started rolling.
Collins addressed what he said appeared to be Lehrmann's case theory.
The theory is, apparently, that Ms Higgins saw Mr Lehrmann emerge from his meeting with Ms Brown on the 26th of March and start collecting his belongings, surmised that he had been sacked because they had come back to Parliament House on the Saturday morning, thought it was inevitable that she was about to suffer the same fate, and so fabricated an allegation of rape in order to save her job. If we've understood that theory correctly, it is, with respect to our friends, incoherent. First and foremost, it would be a monstrous thing, as Miss Higgins herself will tell you, to fabricate an allegation of rape. But then reflect on this. If Miss Higgins was acting to save her job, then she had achieved her objective on the 26th of March 2019. Why on earth, I would have to ask, would she, almost 2 years later, resign from the successor to that job as a ministerial staffer, reactivate her complaint against Mr. Lehrmann with the Australian Federal Police, and give media interviews about what had occurred to her, exposing herself to the extraordinary scrutiny that has since followed?
Something that has changed since 2019 is that Brittany Higgins has a new partner, her now fiancé David Shiraz. He brought the story to Lisa Wilkinson in an email titled Me Too Liberal Party Project Pitch. Right at the end of Lisa Wilkinson's cross-examination, the judge, Michael Lee, wanted to dig into this. And it's worth listening when the judge starts asking questions, because it gives a window into the issues he's interested in. The judge noted an email in which David Shiraz signed off "much love" and noted the email said, "The journalist who will cover this is also a good friend of mine, Samantha Maiden." Here's what Justice Lee asked Lisa Wilkinson.
You considered at this stage when you were having these interactions with Miss Higgins that she was especially vulnerable?
Yes.
Because of that vulnerability, would you accept you have to be especially careful to make sure people in a situation of vulnerability are not being manipulated?
Yes.
Do you think it was a good idea to use someone like Mr. Shiraz as a conduit for communications with Miss Higgins, rather than deal with Miss Higgins directly, to the extent that he was being used as a conduit?
My preference was for Miss Higgins to be the main contact.
Now, as of January 2021, were you someone who was a good friend of David Shiraz?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Would it be wrong for him to refer to you as a good friend as of January 2021?
Yes.
There was a bit more back and forth, and then this remarkable exchange between Wilkinson and her own barrister.
Can I just add a significant fact?
No.
Yes. You'll be happy with this.
No.
Thank you. No.
I only ever met him.
No, Miss Wilkinson.
Once in my life.
Miss Wilkinson, thank you so much for your assistance, and you're excused.
Thank you for excusing my client, Your Honour.
I've been in the same situation as Miss Crescendo.
And finally, there's Bruce Lehrmann and what the judge made of his evidence. Lehrmann's two big admissions were about buying Higgins drinks and about the various stories he has told about entering Parliament after hours. When he buzzed the security desk at 1:41 a.m. and asked to be let in, Lehrmann said he was there to work on documents. But he told Fiona Brown he was there to drink whiskey. In the witness box, Lehrmann said the real reason was he needed to pick up his keys, but he didn't think the security guards would let him in for that reason. Lehrmann said he also spent some time jotting down notes for question time about information he'd gleaned at the pub about the French submarine contract. Matt Collins asked what exactly he needed to write down about question time.
So you say there was discussion at the dock about the French submarine contract?
Yes.
Who was that with?
Oh, I don't remember who it was with.
What was said to you about the French submarine contract?
I can't recall specifics, but it had to do with the potential move that Senator Reynolds was interested in.
Who spoke to you about a potential move?
Well, I would have raised it initially.
Who did you raise it with?
I can't recall who.
You cannot do any better than this, Mr. Lehrmann?
No.
I want you to tell His Honour what information you learned at the dock and 88 miles per hour that was so important that it needed to be jotted down between 1:48 and 2:30 a.m. while you were inebriated in Parliament House.
Oh, well, specifically, I can't recall.
Lehrmann also couldn't explain why he did not contact Higgins after he was sacked for coming in after hours to find out if she had also lost her job. Here's Matt Collins cross-examining Lehrmann on that.
I'll put to you that you never made contact with Ms. Higgins because you knew very well that she had told Ms. Brown that you had sexually assaulted her.
That's never been put to me.
And you knew that she had not been terminated because you had sexually assaulted her.
No.
Collins' case for truth relies on the testimony of colleagues who were out with Higgins and Lehrmann that night, like Lauren Gain.
And I remember Brittany falling over and having to be helped back up. I remember Brittany and Bruce sitting quite close together. I remember them being quite touchy with one another. I remember them kissing, and I remember her taking selfies of the two of them. I remember his hand on her thighs and her hands on his thighs.
And Nikita Irvine.
I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "No." She said, "No. Have you heard what's happened?" I said, "No." And I said, "Okay, was it?" And I paused. And she said, "Yeah, definitely." And I took that to mean it was an assault.
The security guard who found her naked at 4 a.m, the counsellor who said she was flooding with tears throughout her police interview, especially when the rights of the alleged perpetrator were discussed, the police officers who said she seemed distressed, a toxicologist who said her blood alcohol would likely have been 0.23%, a lip reader who said he saw Lehrmann telling Higgins things like, "Drink it all now," and Higgins replying, "Stop, stop," from the pub CCTV taken shortly before the alleged rape. Here's Matt Collins on the reasonableness or qualified privilege defence.
At the end of the day, I will submit that this is not a borderline case. Far from it. I mean, if reasonable doesn't get up on this case, it never gets up.
Collins said it would not be fair to judge Ten's original report in light of all the evidence that has subsequently emerged, including text messages, testimony from political figures, and interviews with police and counsellors.
One does not assess the reasonableness of Ten's conduct through the prism of what is possible in this courtroom. More than 2 years later, having regard to all of the resources that have now been thrown at it, nothing has emerged to show Ms. Higgins' allegation to be false. She stands by it.
Collins said this about if the judge decides he can't find that Lehrmann raped Higgins on the balance of probabilities, that is, if the truth defence fails.
Failure of the qualified privilege defence in this case would compel the conclusion that Australia's defamation laws, at least in force as at the time of the program, do not permit the Australian media to report on allegations of this kind, no matter how well researched, no matter how significant the topic of public interest, no matter the steps taken to verify the facts, no matter that the target was not named, and no matter that the target had no intention of giving a contrary account prior to broadcast.